Welcome back to something different than advertised. I'm still continuing to work on the Jumanji series, but I realised it was taking me way longer than anticipated. So, while I continue to work on those videos, I thought I'd take a look at my backlog and see if there are any movies that I've been wanting to review for a long time. And the first thing I found was a little known film called Mindscape.
Mindscape, also known as Anna in different regions, is a sci-fi thriller. The sci-fi aspect is kinda like a needle in a haystack for this plot, unfortunately. It's there, but it's very easy to miss sometimes. And it stars Mark Strong
In a non-villain role, which certainly seems to be rare to see nowadays, and also Taissa Farmiga. We've dealt with the Farmiga family before in the god-awful Conjuring 2. However, it would take a monumental effort for me to hate this film over the Conjuring 2, mainly because this film isn't based on the lies of two charlatans, which for legal reasons is my opinion and not fact.
The plot revolves around a man who is able to enter people's minds and memories with the aid of technology and his innate psychic ability, and he is haunted by the memories of his dead wife.
Who said Inception? Yes, there's no getting away from it. This film does have similarities with Inception. However, Inception is more of an action heist movie, whereas this film is actually a mystery thriller.
Mindscape is also directed by Jorge Dorado, which is neither a negative nor a positive, as this seems to be his only English-speaking film. However, he was second unit director for Guillermo del Toro's The Devil's Backbone.
So, that counts for something, I guess. Also, before we start, I wanted to talk about the posters for this film.
This is the poster for Mindscape, and this is the Anna poster. And they both quite prominently feature a girl bloodied and holding a knife, which has zero bearing on the film. The poster makes it seem like it's some kind of slasher flick, so people watching it for that are gonna be very disappointed. And another big thing with the Anna poster, you notice the top says the director of Orphan and Non-Stop presents. That's quite a bit of misleading marketing there, because it makes it seem like collete-sera, the director of those two films, directed this film as well, when he didn't. He was merely producer. Not to downplay the large contribution a producer makes to a film, but you must be able to see how deceptive that is.
Now, I know some people might be wondering why I chose this film to talk about. I'm not going to say it's an amazing film. However, I hope this video illustrates why I think this film deserves more recognition than just being a film you've never heard of. So yeah, there's not much setup needed. Let's get into it. This is Mindscape.
The first thing we experience, rather strangely, is the sounds of a prison.
You got 20 minutes.
From the start, the film is very good at putting in small details that at first don't seem to make any sense, but once you've seen the film, it all falls into place.
It then changes to a scene of a woman casually at home when she hears a crash. She investigates, not finding much. However, someone has been reading his creepy killer handbook as they smoothly glide past behind her. Something which perhaps won't make sense in a little bit. Eventually, a fallen over plant pot is found to explain the smashing sound, and that's when John Washington, played by Mark Strong, appears behind her. But for some unknown reason, the woman doesn't notice, walking right past him like he's not even there.
And it certainly makes it creepier that it's Mark Strong. As I said, he's not a villain in this role, but he still has that dark edge that makes this moment more effective than a more conventional leading man would.
It's then the woman is attacked by the unknown assailant as John, with clenched fists, is forced to watch the whole thing unfold.
And weirdly, he attacked her from the same direction he moved in previously. Did he move behind her, but forgot something on the other side of the room? Joking aside, I do actually have an explanation for this later. Just be prepared for a bit of a leap in logic and giving the film the benefit of the doubt.
The woman runs to the bathroom and prepares to defend herself, but the bath she ran starts to overflow, which horrifies John going by his facial expression. The scene then suddenly shifts to John's perspective as he returns to a flooded house, finding a different woman dead in the bathtub. It's then both John and the woman are brought out of this trance as John is having a seizure. The guy in charge, played by Brian Cox, reveals that what we saw was John's memory merging with the woman's memory. However, it's not just a seizure, but a full-blown stroke.
Now that we know what was going on, let's go back to that sneaky killer incident. If this was the woman's memory, how did she know that the killer did that? If that's just what she thought happened, then why is that useful? Let's be honest, this is one of those cases where the filmmakers just wanted to shock the audience, even if it didn't make much sense. Fortunately, these kinds of moments are quite few and far between. At least that's what I would have said, if I hadn't given this scene a bit of thought.
I mentioned it's weird how the attacker sneaks by, but then attacks from the exact same direction.
Now, what if that's not a mistake? Bear with me here because I know this is a bit out there. We're dealing with memories, right? Which we all know aren't hard and fast things. They can be fooled, faulty, misremembered. What if the attacker sneaking by was a sort of memory glitch, merging with a later memory of the attack? Now, I freely admit this is me giving the film way more credit than it deserves, but it is at least a possible explanation.
Now, we're talking about viewing memories, which that whole opening was quite bereft of explanation for. But don't worry, the film's got you covered, as we get the full history of Mindscape, the organisation that runs these memory investigations. We also learn about a senator who's being investigated for embezzlement, but it's literally just a way for the film to explain what Mindscape is. The senator has absolutely nothing to do with the film. We see a picture of one of Mindscape's operatives called Peter Lundgren, who won't be important till much later. And also a picture of John as we learn about mind detectives. It's not just technology. The detectives themselves are actually psychic in some way, with the tech focusing on people's memories. And in this world, these memory psychics were discovered and developed by the military in the 70s.
Which feels like a reference to MK Ultra, even though that program was completely stopped by 1973. But military, psychics, and mind control always seem to lead back to MK Ultra, so I'm just going to assume that's what they were going for. I'm not going to go into too much detail about MK Ultra. All I will say is, don't believe conspiracy theorist hype. MK Ultra basically boiled down to, hey, let's give these people a load of drugs without them knowing and see what happens, with a few other more torturous practices thrown in. A sickening combination of extremely harmful and pointless. Anyway.
One thing the film makes a point of with Mindscape is that it's not perfect and doesn't actually hold much weight in a court of law.
Giving my theory about that sneaky killer more weight too.
But hey, it's better than some things.
Findings of memory detectives do not yet carry the same weight as DNA evidence in court, but currently prove more reliable than polygraph tests.
Ah, that's good. It's considered more useful than a polygraph, which isn't considered useful at all in court. But I guess a 1 is better than a 0.
John, who doesn't seem to be doing very well, is startled by his phone. The caller asks about the house he's selling, but John says he's not anymore. Another detail for later, though it is a bit of an unnecessary scene. After hanging up, John sees the news report about Mindscape and decides to return. Meeting with his boss Sebastian, we get more info, that John has been out of commission ever since his stroke, and there's a moment of clumsiness when John picks up an abacus and the beads fall off.
This is another one of my personal moments I actually feel has more importance than it might seem right now. I will come back to this later.
There's a nice character moment for John when Sebastian offers him a drink, but he politely refuses. But of course, we've seen him drinking alone at home, so he's clearly trying to make himself look more together than he really is. John needs cash and is hoping to be put on the case of the senator. However, the other mind detective, Lundgren, is already on it. Sebastian does suggest John sells the beach house, which is where his wife died, but he's not ready to do that yet.
See? Making that phone call scene a bit irrelevant.
Sebastian does have another case, though, that might be better for John, considering he's a tad rusty. The case involves a teenager named Anna, which just so happens to be the name of John's deceased wife.
Considering John had trouble with the memories of his wife invading his client's memories, picking a client who will inevitably remind him of his wife is probably not the best idea. Also, this is why the film is called Anna in other regions, with its nice double meaning, although Mindscape is a much cooler title, even if Anna is a bit more fitting.
Sebastian talks about Anna, who's played by Thaisa Farmiga, and the job seems pretty simple, at least for now. Anna is on hunger strike, and it's John's job to get her to eat.
Yep, it's as simple as that. Although, if somebody is on hunger strike, there's probably a big reason behind it. but we'll see that Sebastian is making more than a few glaring omissions to the case than necessary. But hey, John's only going to be messing around in Anna's memories. Why would he need the whole story?
So John's off to Anna's address, and here's another one of my moments. Because you'll notice the car John's driving doesn't have a license plate.
Now, the cynic in me wants to say that's because the production couldn't afford a specific car to film, so took someone else's car and just removed the license plate for that particular scene.
After all, you can clearly see the car having its license plate in this shot, but we can't make out what it says.
But a part of me is willing to give the film the benefit of the doubt again, because there is a pretty simple explanation for why there is no license plate, which I will get into at the appropriate time.
John arrives at the mansion where Anna lives and is greeted by her mother and stepfather, who fill John in on how strange Anna was as a child, calling her unusually focused, never smiling or crying too much either, and having an IQ that is off the charts, as they put it.
Which, when you think about it, it's kind of a red flag. It sounds like they're blaming her for what she's doing rather than addressed why she's doing it.
Anna hasn't eaten in a week, so her stepfather wants her institutionalized, which seems a bit extreme, especially considering they're treating it like a tantrum. Also, her mother disagrees with institutionalization, and there's clear tensions between the two, with this extra detail from the stepfather.
I think there are better words for it. I would say haunted.
Another red flag. That's a weird thing to say in isolation. You don't say someone is haunted unless you have some kind of idea why they're haunted in the first place.
And while being taken to Anna's room, her mother tells John about one of those things that Sebastian should have told him, that Anna has been engaging in self-injurious behaviour by cutting herself.
Which, if I recall correctly, was part of her character in American Horror Story. Let's just hope this character fares a little better. Ugh.
John is left alone with Anna, who has quite the creepy party trick.
Can I have a seat?
Do you mind?
She admits that she wouldn't be able to predict his next statement, so tells him to sit down. John sits and makes note that Anna has a metronome running. She says it's soothing while she draws, but there may be more to it than that. And then John tries to lecture her about her lack of eating.
Anna, do you know what catabolis is? If you don't eat, your organs are going to fail.
Now, he's not wrong about organ failure due to lack of eating. However, catabolism is better described as literally digestion. More specifically, the breaking down of large molecules into smaller units, which are either oxidized and used for energy, or used in other reactions in the digestive process. It is completely irrelevant to mention that in this context. However, fortunately, Anna has her own bit of nonsense to counter it.
Do you know what prana is?
It's Sanskrit. It means vital life.
There are yogis in India who rarely eat. They get all their energy, or prana, from the air and the sun.
Now, I'm no expert on prana and the yogis of India, but from what little research I was able to do, this is not strictly speaking correct.
I'm not saying there aren't some people interpreting prana and taking it to the extremes of not eating. Anyone can justify anything with their reasons. But I will say that this is a very rare thing. After all, it does specifically say that we get prana from the food we eat and that it's a good thing. But, in all honesty, this is Anna just messing with the guy rather than giving a legitimate reason for her actions.
After that piece of mild intellectual sparring, John starts with some questions, firstly showing Anna some pictures of facial expressions, with the first one getting a strange answer.
Malice. I'm kidding. She's expressing happiness, maybe even affection.
Both of those responses seem to confuse John, and to me, her first answer, malice, seems more appropriate than joy. I don't know about anyone else, but I don't see joy in that picture.
The next one is far more straightforward.
That guy's pissed off.
And the last one is oddly specific.
I think her husband's out late, and she's wondering where he is. She's worried he's with someone else, but she's also glad to have the downtime, because he's a loser.
I love the flat-out confused look John gets at these answers. What Anna is really doing is she's giving wildly inconsistent answers, so John has difficulty assessing her mental state. He seems to be testing whether Anna has trouble understanding facial expressions in order to determine if she falls into the personality disorder spectrum, which wouldn't be necessary if Sebastian just told him the whole story.
Next, John tries something different and tells Anna a story. A woman at her mother's funeral meets a guy she really likes. She thinks he's great, everything she ever wanted. It's love at first sight. But loses him in the crowd and doesn't get his number. 2 days later, she kills her own sister.
The test is to figure out why she did it. Now, if you've spent any time on the internet, chances are you've heard this one. But if you haven't, feel free to put your answers in the comments below before I reveal what it is. This test is usually presented on the internet as a psychopath test. If you answer a certain way, it means you're a psychopath. Well, I can tell you right now, that's bollocks. There's not one question that would confirm that. And this riddle is diagnostically pretty useless.
Something more useful would be the Hare Psychopath Checklist, which is a much more nuanced 20-item inventory of personality traits to ascertain whether a person falls on the psychopath spectrum. That's another thing as well. Personality disorders are a spectrum, not a binary psychopath, not psychopath choice. The checklist seems pretty effective too. For example, Ted Bundy scored a 39 out of 40 and Eileen Wuornos scored a 32 out of 40. But of course, many others have been evaluated as well.
My point is, there's better evaluation methods than a viral internet riddle.
The answer, however, is figured out by Anna.
Her motive is she wants to meet the guy again.
Even though John claims there is no correct or incorrect answer, Anna correctly determines John is testing her to see if she's a sociopath.
Sociopaths and psychopaths are very similar to each other. The main difference, though, is that sociopaths tend to be more erratic, whereas psychopaths are more cold and calculating. So if you ask me, Anna is showing more signs of psychopathy than sociopathy.
Anna does make a good point about the riddle, though, that the setup itself is flawed.
If the girl didn't know the man, it's unlikely her sister would. And it was her mother's funeral where she met this guy. So it'd make more sense for her to kill her father.
Which, considering her already strained relationship with her stepfather and her real father being dead, I wonder if the film is trying to tell us something there.
I'm not a sociopath, just smart enough to think like one.
Yeah, I'm sure that really helped John's suspicions. After talking with Anna, John checks on how she's being monitored, talking to one of the supervisors, Judith, about the 24-hour surveillance. There's even a bit of love interest thing going on as she gives John her number. Later, John goes over his findings with Sebastian, asking about the possible avenues of treatment, requesting her full file, but once again, being denied.
This is baffling to me, because John is told that the family doesn't want him to know all of Anna's past, and they don't ever consider that it might actually be useful. He's gonna find out anyway, he's literally watching her memories.
John is distracted briefly by the sight of a man who seems to be creepily watching him from afar, but it goes unmentioned. Back with Anna, John is preparing for the first memory viewing, and he explains a few things about the process, like this.
It should feel like it's happening for the first time, but it'll be different from the original event, because your unconscious mind will know that you've been there before.
That one line will go a long way to explain quite a few things we'll see in this film. Also, once again, it adds credence to my sneaky killer theory at the start.
This is another big one.
Now, you may see me in the distance, but you won't know that it's me.
Both of those lines I'll be coming back to later. John also gives Anna some earpieces which will play a non-audible tone, which he says will allow the brain to fall into a theta state.
To explain briefly, a brain in a theta state is usually when it's just about to fall asleep or just after waking up, when the brain waves are measured in roughly 4 to 7 hertz. It's considered the border between unconsciousness and consciousness.
But here's what's interesting. Anna asks to use her metronome during the session. John doesn't have a problem with it. However, maybe he should have, as when the tone plays, we can hear the metronome running on top of it, just as they both go into Anna's early memories.
This being a mystery film, I don't really want to talk about some of the film's revelations before the film itself gets there, so I apologise if I can't talk about my theories just yet.
The session begins and we see a disjointed collection of memories with overriding images of blood, worryingly enough. But then things calm down and John sees Anna's first memory, which is her as a child singing to herself. It's then her stepfather shows up. Nothing happens, but there is a sinister tone to the interaction. There's more traumatic memories as kid Anna sees her mother causing herself to throw up, and she sees her stepfather having an affair with one of the maids. and he responds by locking her in a closet for spying on him.
And although it's not a metronome, it does make you think about the reason why Anna likes a metronome when you see that ornate clock right next to the closet she was locked in. After all, it would be the only sound she could hear while being locked in there.
The memories continue, this time Anna's parents arguing about her mental health with this statement.
He tried to stab you, for Christ's sake!
And immediately after, Kid Anna is cut on the hand when she tries to give her mother a letter opener.
It's difficult to tell if the stabbing her stepfather talked about was the incident we just saw, because if that's the case, it really shows how he's overreacting, because that's not what happened at all. But like I said, it's unclear, and as we never really get clarification on this, we're just left to guess, unfortunately.
The session ends, and despite Anna still experiencing the pain of her hand being cut in the memory, she's surprisingly eager to try another memory viewing right away. Anna tells John that it's her stepfather that should be tested for a personality disorder, but with a glance to the security camera, Anna quickly changes the subject to whether John is married, when John inquires if her stepfather is a reason for the hunger strike. John tells Anna that he was married, and she wants to see a picture of his wife, so John agrees as long as she eats something. And now we finally learn the actual reason for the hunger strike. Her father wants her institutionalized because it would give him access to her inheritance, and something like putting LSD in her food to make her act crazy would be a good reason to put her away. So the solution is simple.
Well then, let's flip out together.
She also makes sure John will demand a drug test if anything happens.
So there you go, simple job, mission accomplished. That is all John was there to do, but of course, he's invested now, and those small amounts of memories he saw were good reason to explore further, even though he's not a psychiatrist and ill-equipped to deal with trauma such as this. But for some reason, people don't seem to have a problem.
John asks Anna's mother to see the letter opener to confirm the memory, but even she says the incident was an accident, so it can't have been the incident her stepfather was talking about, unless her mother is just trying to keep things together. We already know the family is tight-lipped about these things. And before leaving, John even manages to arrange a date with the supervisor Judith, while Anna creepily watches from her window. And later on that date, John and Judith make small talk, and then John decides to talk about his dead wife. It turns out it wasn't just a wife John lost, but a son as well. Using his ability, he was able to allow his wife to relive the memories of their son, but she got obsessed and then depressed, resulting in the bathtub demise we saw at the start.
Yeah, okay, good information for the audience, but isn't that a bit heavy for a first date? I know that Guy has been out of the dating game for a long time, but the whole my wife and son are dead and my wife's death may be my fault angle is not exactly the best icebreaker.
Despite that, the date goes well and John takes Judith home, but things get weirder as he hears Anna and gets a brief glimpse of her walking by. The next day, John tells Sebastian about this, which he confirms would be impossible.
This is another thing I feel the film does very well. Every so often it will throw out these strange moments such as that, just to mess with you, so you're never really too sure what's going on until the very end. There isn't really an explanation given for that moment, but there is enough information that we might be able to speculate on it later.
John gets to the mansion for another session, finding a destroyed table at the bottom of the stairs. Rushing to the surveillance office, he's told that Anna pushed Judith down the stairs, although no camera actually caught Anna doing it. Her stepfather, who's already lacking credibility, confirms it was her, using this as a reason to have Anna institutionalized.
It may look like the film is setting up an obsessive stalker storyline with Anna, and not really. I mean, for the next 10 minutes or so it is, but after that, just like the other incident, it doesn't really affect the film, and we'll just move on to other things quite quickly.
But of course, Anna pleads her innocence, even going so far as accusing her stepfather as he and Judith were having an affair, which obviously gets John's back up, and he has a hard time believing Anna's side of the story. At the hospital, John checks in on Judith and wants to hear her side of the story as well. However, Judith pretty much contradicts everything Anna told him, and after a brief talk with Anna's mother, the entire incident is erased from the film like it didn't even happen.
Now, this makes it seem like it's just a badly written story with plot elements that aren't followed up on correctly. But Perhaps this is supposed to signify that John is a bit too invested in helping Anna. She does have his wife's last name after all, so perhaps he feels that if he helps Anna, it will make up for him not helping his wife, redemption style. Yeah, I know I'm probably giving this film too much credit.
Anna's mother also reveals that Sebastian has the file of everything which has happened with Anna, so after some persuasion, John manages to get her file, and it is quite extensive. First finding a recorded interview with her, talking about her suicide attempt, but even more worrying, Anna talking about how she enjoys the colour and sight of blood, and she does it all with a very cold, unemotional manner.
This is one of those big things that I feel like John should have known about beforehand, because I don't think he would have been as relaxed around her if he'd have seen that interview first. But wait, it gets worse.
There's also a file on a teacher who was arrested for taking photos of Anna, and considering he was arrested for it, you can imagine what kind of photos without me showing it or saying it out of fear of the YouTube satellite death laser obliterating my channel. And if that wasn't enough, we can add Anna's attempted murder of 3 girls as well.
See, what part of that wasn't relevant to her current situation? In fact, if John had seen those files, he might have agreed that she needed to be institutionalized. I'm not saying she does, but those files do change things quite a bit, so it's really weird that he wasn't given earlier access.
Back with Anna, she's drawing John, and interestingly, she doesn't let him see the portrait, placing it in his bag to be looked at later, which is a bit odd but nothing suspicious, at least not yet. After that, the memory session begins with the metronome running again, and we see Anna at boarding school, meeting another girl called Mousy, real name Megan, and then the stereotypical bully girls who tell Anna to leave their shared room, and when she refuses, they lock her in the closet.
The exact same punishment her father used on her. Could be a coincidence, could be something more.
Then, in photography class, the teacher tells the students about the dangerous chemicals they'll be using, which I'm sure won't be relevant for later. And there's the implied overly friendliness with Anna as well. And lastly, when asked about stolen alcohol, Anna defends her roommate and her friends, which gets her in the quote-unquote cool crowd, while turning against her previous friend, Mousy. However, before ending the session, John notices a nearby clock isn't running. And now, here comes one of the biggest pieces of information for the film, because John suspects those memories we just saw were either fabricated or Anna was just remembering what she wanted to remember, because when someone does that, it leaves a trace on the memory.
False memories can have a rushed feeling to them, a lack of detail. The windows won't have views, or none of the clocks will work.
This is quite important to remember because we saw at the start how the clock was running slow. So small details like that in memories can sometimes be missing, like clocks not running, or perhaps a shelf of books having no features, or maybe license plates missing from cars. Huh? See what I mean about it possibly not being a mistake? And you should start to see now why I find this film so compelling. You can choose to see all of that as just a production mistake, but if it is what I suspect it is, then that's a very clever attention to detail, and I love attention to detail.
Anna is quick to deny the memory was wrong or that she harmed the girls she's accused of trying to kill, with even a clumsy bit of manipulation of John.
If you ever find me particularly attractive in a memory, it's probably because I'm making it up too. I wouldn't picture myself having a bad skin day if I knew you'd be around.
Which he disregards quite quickly. But then Anna convinces him by saying the clock he saw never worked anyway.
Now, this has 2 effects. 1, John is less likely to trust his own instincts now he's been proven wrong. And 2, he's more likely to trust Anna. Was this intentional? We don't know. We don't even know if she's telling the truth at this point.
And then, to really mess with John's head, he sees a picture that Anna drew, which shows the exact scene John thought he imagined earlier of Anna walking around.
The 3 big questions are, was that a real event earlier? If it wasn't, how does Anna know about it? And when did she draw that? Because if she drew it before John got there, wouldn't he have noticed it earlier? Again, I have my theories, but let's continue for now.
Next, John starts corroborating parts of Anna's story, first by going to the prison where the photographer is now being held. The guy clearly hates the family John is working for, and basically claims that he was the one seduced, not the other way round, even saying that Anna doesn't have a soul, which, let's be honest, even if that were true, hardly exonerates him of his actions. Next, John goes to visit Anna's roommate.
My name is John Washington. Can I ask you a few questions about Anna Green?
Are you a cop?
When asked, she says that there was no girl called Mousy at the school, and her voice is strangely deep. And when asked if she has a specific memory of Anna John should know, she shows him the hole in her throat.
Now, there are a lot of different chemicals used in photograph developing, but there are a few that could cause that type of injury. However, getting someone to drink that stuff accidentally is, pardon the pun, hard to swallow.
And before leaving, John sees the man looking at him from a distance, which should start to make some sense, slightly. Back in Anna's memory now, John sees the clock running, and the girls are having a tea party, it seems, as they all drink, and it affects them immediately, like they just drank acid, which is a bit extreme. And Anna even quickly spies Mousy, implying that she was the culprit.
The main thing that confuses me there is, what were they drinking exactly? Because earlier we saw them drinking alcohol from the bottle, so why the switch to tea? And if it is still alcohol, why bother heating it up? Because I would have thought if you're drinking underage, you wouldn't really bother making a hot toddy. And that's only the first problem, because we saw them blowing on the liquid to cool it down. I can tell you now, when you're this close to chemicals like ammonium thiosulfate, sodium carbonate and acetic acid, you ain't gonna want to drink that. Now, again, is this a production mistake, or is Anna just lying here? It could go either way, which seems to happen a lot in this film.
To add some credence to the idea that this may be a fabricated memory, if we go all the way back to Anna's first memory session and take a look at those flashes John got just before the memory begun, there is a few frames of a doll tea party with some blood. Now, that's not a definite answer, but it is a pretty strange coincidence and adds to the speculation. After the session, there's a back and forth of John accusing Anna, but she explains why it was the other girl, Mousy, who did it. John tells her he knows there wasn't any Mousy at the school, but Anna has a rebuttal for that too.
Megan transferred in during the second semester and left right after I got expelled.
Now, whatever you say about this film's writing, one thing I think it gets right to a disturbing degree is how someone can manipulate and how another person allows that. Because Anna giving an excuse to John for everything is not meant to convince all. It's meant to make everything very confusing. Because a master manipulator won't give definite answers, but instead make all answers equally confusing to the situation.
Oh, and another thing manipulators do.
No, and who the hell do you think I am? Please tell me, John. What, you think I'm some psychopath?
Act personally offended when called out, turning the guilt on the accuser. Anna gives John her yearbook and a picture of her and Mousy with her name on the back, seemingly confirming her version of events. That night, John is doing some Googling, basically for what a therapist would know already, so again, really don't know why he's still on this case. But anyway, John takes a look at the picture Anna drew for him, and bleak is the word for it, I think. Later, John experiences flashes of memories similar to when he's starting a session with someone, and when he wakes up, he hears someone in the bathroom singing, and then Anna creepily appears at his front door.
Now, I do suspect those flashes of memory are relevant and part of the explanation for why she's able to appear outside his door when she doesn't leave the house.
And speak of the devil, John then gets a phone call. There's no one on the other end, but it is from Anna's home, so that's where John is off to next. John gets to the gates with the camera clearly capturing him breaking in, and he sees that Anna is still in her room. After her light goes out, John sees the man who's been following him and decides to confront him, but John fails to catch up, with the man disappearing entirely. Later, John shows up for a session, finding his way into Anna's father's office and decides to do a bit of snooping, finding files concerning Anna's inheritance, but he's soon interrupted by her stepfather. John tells him that it's not necessary to have him followed, however, he says that he hasn't had anyone follow John, and then dismisses it quickly.
This is another one of those scenes that has a specific meaning depending on your opinion of the film. On one hand, by the end of the film, this scene may absolutely make no sense. On the other hand, if you're like me, this scene will actually make perfect sense and will show how the writer understood their own material really quite well.
We move back to another session between John and Anna. Firstly, clearly hearing the metronome running, the memory takes place in a dark room during Anna's photography class. However, something feels off about it, and the clock is running even slower than it has in the past. And Anna even seems to notice John standing there as she leaves the tap running. And just like the start of the film with running water, the memory changes to his wife's death once more, before coming out and finding Anna has been out of the memory for some time.
This is the first part of me explaining the strange things John has been experiencing concerning Anna. Because if she can come out of the sessions at will, who knows what else she can do? And I suspect that the metronome is key.
Because it's the thing we hear always going in and coming out of memory sessions. And you'll remember that the process uses an earpiece that plays a tone in white noise.
What if the metronome overrides that part, giving Anna a lot more control and John a lot less control than he realises?
While John was unconscious, Anna changed the screensaver of his laptop to roses, and I'm sure she did nothing else untoward that John shouldn't check up on immediately. After the session, John goes to speak with Sebastian, complaining about side effects, hallucinations, headaches, and nightmares. He also mentions the guy who's been following him everywhere he goes, but Sebastian doesn't even acknowledge it. He thinks John should be taken off the case since he's getting too personally involved, but John is determined to find out what is going on. After that, we're quickly in another memory, but it seems to be a memory we've seen before of a young Anna playing. However, instead of her father approaching this time, it's Sebastian, and he's holding the abacus that John broke earlier in his office. John quickly ends the session, which causes Anna to fall unconscious.
Which, not to spoil things, wasn't caused by John breaking the connection and much more likely caused by the effort of fabricating that memory.
John helps Anna up and gives her some medication, and Anna's face, when he tells her what it is very significant. John is confident that Anna will get better now this supposed truth is known, and before leaving, she gives him a key as some kind of keepsake.
Meaning, all the pieces are now in place and the dominoes will fall quite quickly now.
John goes to confront Sebastian, making quite the scene about it, and John tells him what he saw and why he was brought in.
You brought me in because I was down, and I was weak, and I was easy to manipulate.
Well, he's not wrong, just might be wrong about the manipulator. John explains to Anna's parents what she needs, and that institutionalization is the worst thing possible. And Anna gives him another picture, this time of herself, with a message and a smiley face. Later, back home, John takes a shower and seems to hallucinate his wife and son.
And it's around more running water, which is strange because this isn't a memory, is it?
This is where the other shoe falls, though. While John is clearing up his files, he sees the note from Anna and discovers that the message Mousy wrote on the picture is Anna's handwriting, with the same smiley face for good measure. And in the yearbook, the girl Anna said was Mousy is a different girl entirely.
This shows that Anna has been manipulating her memories pretty much from day one. However, I think I can describe the chain of events here.
I believe Anna's first memory as a child is genuine. However, it was that session where she discovered the metronome can override the session and give her a form of lucidity. That's why the second session, the first memory of the school, had a similar event, being put in a closet. Anna used her first genuine memory to modify the second one.
And after that, she's been testing the waters, no pun intended again, and changing things to fit her own narrative in order to manipulate John into doing what she needs him to do, which we'll be getting into.
Because all that might seem relatively innocent at first, but this is where things get bad, really bad, as John remembers Anna changing the screensaver, so checks his downloads.
Sorry to stop for a second, but I just wanted to point out how weird it is that John's computer is running a Mac OS on a non-Mac laptop. Granted, that's not impossible, but it is quite odd.
But anyway, John discovers that Anna did much worse than just changing his screensaver. She also downloaded hundreds of pictures of the kind that got the photography teacher sent to prison.
So naturally I can't show John's discovery on YouTube for reasons that should be obvious. YouTube's orbital death laser and all that.
Before John can react to the discovery, he gets a phone call.
You, John?
Anna, look, I need to talk to you.
Something terrible has happened and I need to...
So John is off again to the house. He tries calling again but doesn't get an answer. The door to the place is wide open and it's oddly quiet. And it's interesting how this mirrors the start when the woman searched her house and John was silently observing, and now John's shadow is silently observing him. In the surveillance room, John sees Anna's parents either knocked out or killed. That's when the door is locked on him, and on the cameras, Anna finds her parents, running away from an unseen attacker. John sees the man again on the camera just before they all go down. But after a short amount of time, the door just opens on its own.
And I must admit, it is a bit odd that John doesn't suspect in some way that he's being played.
He calls the cops, but according to the dispatcher, they've already got multiple units responding. Again, another thing John should just take a second to contemplate. John finds a trail of blood, making sure to step in it. Wouldn't want to make things too difficult for the cops after all. He sees Anna running and takes chase into the woods. Eventually, she does appear out of nowhere, seemingly perfectly fine, and she grabs John's hands and apologizes before running away. The cops find John on his own, and his hands are now covered in blood,
showing how her self-injurious behaviour has also been part of this plan of hers.
It's clear John has been set up by Anna, but the cops don't believe him, claiming that he was the attacker Anna was running from, and her parents weren't dead, they were knocked out. Also, this detail.
We found the mother's sleeping pills in the kitchen, John.
Makes that earlier look Anna gave all the more significant now. And also this.
We found a letter opener covered in blood in the forest where you were.
It shows Anna used that memory to get John to touch the letter opener. John is accused of doing a lot of stuff. He says he couldn't have possibly done any of it as he was locked in the surveillance room. And that's when the key Anna gave him is brought up. 'Cause yeah, it's the key to the surveillance room. And the last piece of evidence they have is a call from Anna to the police saying John was trying to kill her.
They say they have the phone records that proves that he was the attacker. However, they never bring up the call that Anna made to him in the first place. That introduces more than enough speculation to the case to, at the very least, give John a fighting chance.
It's then the final reveal is made, as the man who has been following John appears before him and says what John has been saying at the end of every session.
And coming back now.
Yes, the entire film has been inside John's mind this entire time. That's why at the start of the film we heard the sounds of a prison. I bet you didn't see that coming. Although you probably did, because I've been hinting the fuck out of it this entire video. But this does explain those strange inconsistencies, like the license plate, that at first look like production errors, but actually make a lot of sense. However, there's something else I'd like to go over.
Throughout the film, John has been seeing this man, Peter Lundgren, following him, and has even tried to catch up to him.
Now, the initial instinct is to say that this can't be possible because the first time these events occurred, there wouldn't have been a Lundgren there to freak John out and having him accuse Anna's stepfather of having him followed. However, you just have to remember what John said.
It should feel like it's happening for the first time, but it'll be different from the original event, because your unconscious mind will know that you've been there before.
That, coupled with the fact that John is a trained memory viewer as well, it makes sense that he could, albeit accidentally, change the memories around a bit. And having said that, we then understand what Anna is.
This is just speculation on my part, but I do believe that from the very first session Anna had, she realised that just like John, she was the same kind of psychic he was, and every bit of information about the process John told her was inadvertently training her to not just understand it and use the technology, but to be better than it.
Again, it's just speculation, but I believe you could interpret this film as some kind of origin story for a supervillain or anti-hero style character. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what attracted me to this film.
After the session is completed, Lundgren explains what Anna was doing and even confirms that she found that running water triggered John's memories of his wife and used that to her advantage. He tells John that he'll do everything he can to see John's side of the story told, but outside of Anna showing up alive, there's not much else that can be done.
Also, there's a nice detail here of John's prison number, 213A312. It's a palindrome. It reads the same backwards as forwards, because we just saw John progress through the movie forwards, but he was actually going backwards into his memories. I like little details like that.
But fortunately for John, Anna may be a psychically superpowered borderline psychopath, but she's not a monster, as she sends a single rose to John with a picture of herself holding a recent newspaper to prove she is indeed still alive, even giving a creepy look into the camera, breaking the fourth wall, possibly implying the aforementioned new superhuman abilities. And the film ends with John finally selling his old house and reconciling with Judith, giving us a relatively happy ending.
Apart from, as I said, the psychically superpowered borderline psychopath being loose to do God knows what. But I'm sure it'll be fine. That was Mindscape. And I freely admit it's not the perfect film, it's certainly not the best film ever made, and I may be one of the few people who actually thinks it's good. But I still maintain it deserves to be known about.
At the end of the day, it all comes down to how you interpret this film. I may be generous in my interpretation, but the fact that interpretation can be made at all is significant. I like this film because it makes me think. And like I said, as long as I've made people aware of its existence, and perhaps more people can look at it with a similar generous eye that I have, then that's all I can ask for. The acting for some of the veterans in this film, like Mark Strong and Brian Cox, was okay, but they were massively overshadowed by Taissa Farmiga, who plays Anna in such a way that you're never too sure about her sometimes. She's vulnerable, and yet other times she comes off as quite creepy, and yes, psychopathic.
It's a very well done performance that sells the film for me. Without that, the film would have been significantly worse off for it. So that was Mindscape, and I hope I have opened up a few minds to this film. No pun intended.
Thank you so much for watching. I'd like to give a massive thank you to all my Patreon donators. Their support really does help a lot. And if you would like to contribute to the channel and gain access to the Deusdaecon Reviews Discord server, the link is in the description below. Also, I'm currently at university right now, working on a forensics degree, so obviously all content is a little slow and difficult to get to you. All I can say is I'm still continuing to work on things, so more videos are on the way, and I thank you so much for your patience with that. And of course, I continue to stream live on Twitch when I can, where things are just as efficient and coordinated as this.
Shit, I'm gonna die. You just killed me, you bastard. But it's functional, for God's sake. You son of a bitch. At least my grave floats. It's not the Chelsea Flowers show. It's Valheim, for God's sake. It doesn't have to look pretty, just as long as it fucking works. You made that impossible. I couldn't do that. You killed me, you bastard.
The link is in the description below, so hopefully I will see you there. And on YouTube, I'll see you next time.